Welcome to the ST Forge, a podcast where we break down the industry's newest TTRPGs, why you should run them, and our thoughts on how they are made. Welcome to the ST Forge, the podcast where we dive deep into the industry behind TTRPGs and why you should play them or not. We're back. We have a fancy intro that plays now. I think we had it last time. Special thanks to our producer that actually set that up. But this time, you have Rick Hines and Pat Edwards, one of the other co-founders of Storytellers Forge. And today, we're diving into the RPG if you're an Evangelion fan. So, Eldritch Automata. They are a brand new TTRPG, literally from scratch. It's Gehenna Gaming's first crowdfunding attempt to make a book. And this podcast is going to dive pretty deep into the perils of crowdfunding as a new studio, convincing your play group to try brand new systems. But we're also going to shine a spotlight on the larger scope of what the hell Eldritch Automata is. So, for those of you guys who don't know, Gehenna Gaming is a studio podcast group, mini convention organization that focuses mostly around horror and dark themed RPGs. Early on, from when I first encountered them, it was mostly through the Vampire the Masquerade, which is a game system very near and dear to my heart. But throughout the years, they've expanded. They do a convention every October about horror and like a digital con during COVID, back during the apocalypse. And they have continued to move forward in the sphere of creatives. Now, they have this crowdfunding RPG for a game where you pilot mecha against seraphim and eldritch horrors. And they're smart enough to brand it entirely as, if you like Evangelion and Cthulhu and weird, insane, Japanese RPGs and anime, you're going to like this. So, why? Pat, what do you know about this project?
Really only what I've been able to see from the page, from the backer kit page. I've taken some time to look through it. And honestly, I almost got sidetracked with the engine they're using, because I sometimes go down rabbit holes with different core rule system game, logistics and gaming engines, and I was really fascinated by that and just the choice to use that engine. I like it a lot. But as far as this project specifically, I'm familiar with Gehenna Gaming. I've collaborated with them on things like live streams. I've read through the whole page, the whole backer kit crowdfunding page, and I think there's a lot of very interesting things going on here. About yourself?
This one, I always like to talk about the team behind it, who's actually doing the stuff. Now, we are super familiar with running a crowdfunding campaign from scratch where you have nothing. And this team is actually one of the smallest teams for a crowdfunding campaign of an RPG book of this size that I've come across in the past 2 years from covering them. The lead designer is Nick Francia, and the main artist is Michelle Gio Manning. Now, the art for this project is just freaking top tier. Geo has some of the amazing action shots of massive mecha, beautiful seraphim, especially if you download the quickstart packet, which we'll dive into the actual horrors that are there. And the developmental editor is Ian Mueller, and there's additional writers on the project and some additional artists that kind of come from the connections in Gehenna Gaming network, as they were. And a lot of times when you see new TTRPGs coming up and they're born from, I want to say, the Twitter TTRPG sphere at times, or they come from influencers or actual creations where they're doing actual plays more than they are creating an RPG book, it's two completely different modalities of creation. And so getting a bunch of people together that come from different mediums to work together on a project and actually produce something has a lot of hurdles and a lot of risk. But they've managed to do it, and the biggest success for this is that they failed once before. And they originally went to crowdfunding on Kickstarter on January 2nd of 2024. And I was like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I literally messaged the creators that you're launching a crowdfunding campaign the day after New Year's And I'm like, you have no lead up, no build up, and you have a 65,000 stretch goal, which people thought was incredibly high. I disagree. I think that base funding goal was on point, that what you need to actually pay your writers and your artists to actually produce a book from scratch. It was the date, the time, not the concept or the game or the engine or the artwork, because the creativeness in this, something unique, is there, but they have a lot of hurdles to overcome in order to build a successful audience in a project. I've kind of been picking their brain about what are they doing, what are their tactics, what's the engine behind the scenes, why did they launch on January 2nd? And Pat, did you ever follow their prior crowdfunding campaign?
I didn't follow it in real time, but in sort of doing a little homework before this recording, I found that page as well, and I found then the current active, as of us recording this, the active funding that still has 11 days left to go. And spoiler, is doing very well. So good for them. And I was really intrigued by that, just looking at the difference in success from the two campaigns, which not a lot of time between them, right? That was just earlier this same year, and they're blowing it out of the water, doing great now. But yeah, I definitely see where there's a lot more to it, to the current page, as far as information, as far as bells and whistles, visual elements, art, things to draw you in. I don't think... I can go back. I don't think the quick launch preview was available in the original, and that quick launch is awesome too, because like the art, like that first piece that's on page 4 of like the giant mech, effing gorgeous. You should just go download just for that. That's so good.
And I want to talk about this, and I want to dedicate a segment of this particular podcast for new people and new studios that are trying to get into crowdfunding, because this right here is a story and a lesson, and everybody on the Gehenna Gaming team would probably be more than happy to talk to you about their lesson learns. But at least if you are thinking about going to crowdfunding with a project, pay attention to what they did first and what they did second. And I'll give you the inside scoop behind that right here, because I've interviewed and kind of talked to the creators. Their first crowdfunding campaign had about 3 weeks of marketing lead up, and they were trying to do a thing with a major marketing firm and jump right into the project and thinking it was going to go because of their actual play and influencer connections that they had as partners from Gehenna Gaming on the team. They launched just after the holidays, when everybody is already fried and spent. January is typically one of the worst months to historically launch a crowdfunding campaign. But they're a small studio with no money. They can't actually make the book or do more artwork or commit time for art without actually raising up some of the funds. So they have a catch-22. And they only had roughly one piece of artwork at the time, no quick start guide, and very little preamble and lead up. They kicked in their ads about, I think, like a week or two after their crowdfunding had already started, and they made it up to like just a middling amount of their goal before they wisely chose to pull the plug and cancel the crowdfunding, and instead focus on finishing the quick start guide. After it failed, they then dove down, actually wrote content, spent more time focusing on it, building up crowdfunding page assets, developing the quick start guide and getting that thing fully written, produced, the rule sets, some artwork, something that they could have, which served as an engine for them to mind that quick start guide to create trailers and visuals and more things that you could put in advertisement and different types of things. There's a message of refocusing your branding. At the start, I wrote a whole blog post when they sent it to me as press, and I was like, there's nothing for me to write about, other than knowing that the game is about, sort of this Evangelion mindset where you are piloting these, giant machines of war that have an AT field against, angels and eldritch beings to save humanity. There wasn't anything for me to go off of, which means that your press outreach is also really low.
I think that's something that I see a lot too, and I have conversations with you have conversations, we have conversations together with people, you have some on your own. I've had some with people that are looking at doing solo passion projects, and yeah, it feels like they're rushing to the crowdfunding because I guess you want to know You want money in your hand, or you want to know what you have to work with. And I think that's the number one thing. One of the biggest things I see way too often is not giving yourself enough lead up time to collect those emails and those followers. And that's so crucial. When I was at a con earlier this year, there was a person next to our booth I was talking to, and they have it looks gorgeous, this game they're putting out, this tabletop. They've been collecting emails on their pre-launch page for literal years. That might be a bit excessive, but years, multiple years they've been collecting on this pre-launch page. I think later this year they're finally going live with it. And at this point, there's something like 11,000 emails on there. But that part, like giving yourself that lead time, and also like to your point, like the quick guide. I mean, I want to talk about this quick guide too. But yeah, that's something where work yourself like crazy. You're creating something, you're writing, or you're doing the art or the format. Put a deadline, that's fine. Work yourself to it. But the thing that, to your point, you need to be very precise and patient with is the crowdfunding. Is when you set it, how much time you give yourself before it. That's so critical.
It's a catch-22 as well for new studios. I mean, we had the same exact problem, ourselves. How do you make a book that is a 250 page plus full color ttrpg that has a baseline cost for creation of that's not counting print run, advertising, or anything else, like physical assets and things like that. Just the cost for the art and the writers and the editing and the layout has a baked in cost. And you can't, as much as everybody wants to be, the Paizo or the Cypher Games or Level Up, and come to market with a book that's already done, that's going to ship within 30 days, it's just not realistic for new studios to do that. And that's actually the purpose of crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So what did they do the second time? And here's the win, right? Like, we've been a little critical on their first launch, but the studio sat there, they looked at what they were doing. They're like, okay, no, we really want to do this. We're dedicated to it. And they launched again. And currently they're just a scotch away from $100,000.
Yeah, I was going to say we should give people, if they're not, so yes, the current campaign, which still has, as of the day of us recording this, 11 days to go, has $98,911 pledged. So close to that 100,000. 991 backers. Juxtapose that against the first attempt, which was just the beginning of this year, which reached only 37,453 backers. So double the backers, more than double the backers, and 2.5 times as of right now. So it's probably going to end up being at least 3 times the pledges in dollars. So obviously this is such a wonderful real-time example of how to sort of pivot, re-strategize, and then come back stronger than ever and win, essentially.
So what in this case, like, they got partners, they're partnered up with Alchemy TTRPGs. They've, got a lot more swag, I guess, with like the GM screens. The other part, their stretch goals are about to hit a full soundtrack, which I am so glad that, the idea of soundtracks added to your TTRPGs is like taken off. Providing avenues for musicians to get involved is obviously near and dear to like my personal heart. But so now let's talk about what they're actually doing in a game aspect. There's a hurdle that every group faces when everybody only plays D&D and Pathfinder or White Wolf systems. And they have their RPG group. They know what they're playing. It's day in or week in, week out, or maybe if you have to battle the adult D&D scheduling cycle, maybe once a month. How do you get people to switch over to a new game system? Eldritch Automata is here, and it's a whole new world, right? This isn't something that you can typically plug into somebody's existing chronicle unless you massively shift things in an urban fantasy setting to be like, okay, this is here. Everybody in the world messed up, and now angels and demons and eldritch creatures are running around, and humans invent these, giant machines and mechs to go fight, pilot, and battle them. So you are basically asking your play group to try a brand new system. So what's cool about this world that appeals to you, Pat?
I mean, I love the idea of, it's something where, as they've even mentioned, they're referencing popular content, pieces of media that deal with giant robot suits, giant mechs fighting for humanity's survival. But there's a reason why this continues to be really attractive. But I think they did this really good job of touching, like using these things, Neon Genesis and Pacific Rim as like touchstones, is kind of opening the door for you. But then they're putting their own unique spin on it. I think there was one line that really drew me in. It's right at the start where it's like, yes, monsters, humanity is struggling to survive. It's especially bleak because it's not just mindless monsters. Apparently, it's mindless monsters controlled by like angels or angelic immortal creatures that want to control us as well. And then the line, it's so small, it's 4 words, but that really, really hooked me in this kind of opening paragraph is, so they set this whole stage like, okay, bleak world, we're fighting to survive. Who doesn't want to pilot a big robot and fight monsters, right? That sounds awesome. But then at the end it says, oh, this automata, and then that's slowly killing you. I'm like, oh, I love. It's like, what's another wrinkle here? So not only am I fighting for the survival of humanity, but I'm also basically sacrificing. Like, I want to know more about that. Like, it's killing me. Like, the thing is killing me too. The thing I'm using. I like stuff like that where it's like a price, right? There's a cost to, if you're going to do this and take up this mantle. I kind of really
so I think that's
this.
what separates it definitely into that horror science fiction universe, right? Because the game, when you actually dive into the quick start package, is really a lot about psychological torment. Sure, you get the fun action scenes and things like that, but you actually have the ability to, just by even rolling dice, your character is going to take mental stress and suffer traumatic disorders and, going berserk.
Look, if I was faced with this on the quick start guide, this piece of art on page 7, who I'm going to call Chomps, I think I would have mental stress too.
Chomps, for those listening, is literally a creature that we have no idea how big it is, but is nothing but mouth and teeth and all of the best places. So you're gonna pilot these mechs, and you're also gonna have the governments, the conspiracy, I believe they call it like the coalition. They have an acronym, the CHF, the world body that's trying to do these things. So you have that Pacific Rim element, that it is a global conflict. You also have the far more personal thing where, if in the actual adventure that you play in the quick start guide, one of your friends ends up becoming an out of control, sort of berserk, hell bent on destroying the actual base that your characters start in. And the most beautiful part of the writing in the quick start guide to me was that the adventure and the final fight against the Seraph pretty much ends up with the characters losing, and it sets the stage for the global campaign that comes next. And I like the idea of ending with a bit of a defeat right out of the gate to set the stakes narratively. Other fun parts of the engine and what you can play and how they hooked me. They mentioned Escaflowne. Guys, Escaflowne was the best Isekai anime ever, with the most terrible ending, because I stand by my flag that nobody would choose to leave that world, and she chose to stay home. But this piloting mechs that hurt you and trying to survive, you could have a lot of fun with that. And then you still have that on person in the ground, like running around doing conspiracy and role play. Then you get in your mechs and you go fight the horrible things. Unlike an Evangelion RPG, which already has all the established lore and characters, you get to actually be those things.
Yeah, it seems like they are giving you everything you need, but also giving you, and I could be wrong, but just going off of like what's on the crowdfunding page and the quick start guide, it's kind of striking this nice medium between, they're giving you what you need to run a game in this world, and there's obviously lore building and world building to it, but it feels like there's enough flexibility here where you could kind of, if you were going to do like a real long form campaign with this book, you could have a lot of creative license as the GM, as the storyteller.
I almost think that you kind of need to do this one in long form campaign mode. I think that this is a game that you get your group to commit to at least playing a 10-week game session, or little mini chronicle to try it, just to try something different and flesh things out and do something more epic. Have you ever played the Year Zero engine?
I was going to ask you your familiarity with that. Once, and it's been a long time, and I'm really interested by it.
So the Year Zero engine is easy to pick up. It's quick. The base mechanics are you roll in d6, right? You have an attribute, you have some skills. Anybody who's familiar with White Wolf systems, where you have your attributes tied to your skills, or even Star Wars West End, you're gonna be able to navigate right to this. The caveat, the Year Zero engine, is there's a mechanic called pushing, and pushing is integral. And what pushing means is when you roll a dice, they assume in Year Zero that you're basically going to fail at everything. In order to get a success, you actually have to roll a 6 on your dice pool. And one success does not mean that you are glorious at your activity. Instead, you actually have to take that 6 and risk it and push it and pull your successes going forward and kind of build them up over a series of rolls, which creates a very high tense system with a huge payoff at the end of your roll. In Eldritch Automata, while you're doing those rolls, you also have stress dice. The more you push, the more you risk your character's sanity and your psychological ability. So inherently in the dice rolling system, you're going to have rewards and consequences to your characters right out of the rip. So that makes a dynamic system that is going to allow the game architect, in this case, to sit back and have stories be told just by the outcome of players' dice, which I think is a fundamentally strong argument for why anybody should try the Year Zero system once. It's not just, oh, did you roll a natural 20 or did you roll a natural 1 with a high swingy thing? You have degrees of success, and I love game systems with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of selling myself on this. Shout out Gehenna Gaming. If you ever do like a promo one shot or a miniseries and you need players, I'm so interested.
So here's a question, Pat. If you were working on this project, what would you do different?
Ooh, man, that's a great question. Because I was looking at the pledge levels. I feel like, side note, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to answer your question. I do want to shout out the pledge levels, though, because I feel like it's really reasonably priced for what you're getting for it. $55 for a hardcover is solid. And they have those $500 tiers where you can create your own pilot archetype or own horror in the book. That's pretty solid.
So while you think about that, I'm going to talk about that. The fun thing about supporting a crowdfunding campaign that is in the creation mode is the creators are allowed to put up tiers like become a pilot and create your own Eldritch horror. In indie studios, when you get to go to market with your first run is the only time that you as backers and people listening get a chance to actually make yourselves into the book or design something cool that you get to like play with forever. Because once the book's done, and that's the downside of like the major studios where they come to crowdfunding with the book already done, there's no room for you to back a tier to directly support the art and kind of get some fan service for yourself while you're doing it. Have you come up with your solution yet, Pat, or your answer?
As far as what I do different, I feel like it's hard. I mean, it's hard to argue because it's doing so well with what they've done. If in the book, so I know the quick start guide gives you like a little adventure to play through, right? I would say, and maybe I'm missing it, I'm not 100% clear if there is a narrative campaign included in this, or if it's more of like the setting and kind of a head start for you to start your own campaign.
It's an adventure. It's kind of like a convention. Yeah, it's a convention quick play adventure, and it's not
the quick download is. I mean, in the book proper, is there more of a long form?
That's the catch-22. They haven't finished the book yet, and this is the plight of every indie studio going to market. You don't know how big of a book you can write or how much art you can have and what you can do. And even the things that I would say, oh, I would have done this differently on my end. You can't necessarily make those calls at this stage of book production. Right? This is true crowdfunding at its core, where they're trying to raise the funds to actually make something cool.
Because it's something where if there is going to be a narrative campaign, I'd want to know what that plot is. I'd want to know like a blurb on that. right? What's your hook for the plot? That sounds like an interesting adventure to play. The concept is interesting. I already said I want to play this myself. But if there's and obviously it talks a lot about all of the tools and resources it provides to you, as if you are, whether you are the storyteller or you are going to be a player. So for character building, and if you're going to build a campaign, it's obvious you're going to get a lot of tools to do that. But that was the one thing I was like, I feel like it answers a ton of questions. It's a really good, especially this current active one is a well-constructed crowdfunding page. The one thing that jumped out to me was I actually don't know, is there a narrative campaign included in this? And if there's not, that's fine. There's tons of books that are set in books or prompts and everything is answered. But if there is a narrative, that should be like, other than we just want to be, like a little bit more than these things want to eat us or control us.
That's actually that's very similar to what I would have done if I worked different. If I worked on this project, I would have made sure that there was something up there for the factions that you can play and the type of like classes or pilots you could play. Right. I got a good idea for the world, what's going to be happening. There's these elements, but at some point, you are trying to sell a new project to people who are not playing the game system. And even just a bit like, here are these different sites and how different governments are handling things, or what the factions or archetypes or something that you might play. I think those would be quick little things to chuck up there.
They do list the types of pilot archetypes, but just the names of them. And some of them are pretty descriptive, and you can probably infer some of their attributes from the names. But I think, or maybe taking a couple of them, like 2 or 3 as an example of what it means to play a pilot archetype. The hatred, what does that mean? What does the sheltered mean? The manufacture, what is that? And give you a sample. That'd be interesting.
I think I would want to put up here, like, here is, because I had to go all the way through the Dark Passenger adventure before I started finding signs that, like, hey, here's some of the factions, the Earth government, what they're doing. It's the coalition of humanity's forces, right? And talking a little bit about, there's got to be different factions involved in that. And the reason why is it helps both players land themselves to the system, and it also allows storytellers to figure out what kind of story they could tell, which is my next question, Pat. Who is this game for?
Nerds. No. Like us. Who is this game for? I mean, obviously, the easy answer, the very obvious,
no easy answer.
On a plate answer is. Oh, okay. Well, getting past, people who are big fans of the genre that is big robot fight big monster. Beyond that, I think it's people that like RPGs that want to try something different. I think from a forever GM standpoint, this would be interesting to try, because the year 0 engine can be, it looks like, and if you pull up, there's like quick start versions of it, but there's kind of 2 different ways you can do it with dice. But like the dice pool where it's just all d6s, the sort of that version of it feels like, if you are like a GM who wants to try a new system, it feels like this one wouldn't be the hardest to pick up, and this would be a fun way, because it would feel new to your players also, because it's new and different, and it could feel to you as the forever GM trying a new system out.
Okay.
And also, it seems like a game that encourage you, if you're the type of storyteller or GM that likes to torment your players psychologically, this feels tailor-made for you.
That ties right into mine. One of my things of who this game is for that group of players that all talk about wanting to get together and role play, right? But life has gotten in their way, because you could tell in this system, because your pilots have a high chance of death or going insane and having a tragic end, you could tell a 6 to 7 game session story, and that's it. That's the end of your campaign, right? And you just let everybody with those hanging feelings of darkness. And they're easy to schedule. And because of that, you don't need to necessarily have the same play group sit down at the table. The game setting almost feels like it's the perfect game of you, the storyteller, saying, I am going to run on Thursday night. Whoever shows up at my house is going to get to play. And then the next game session, you do the same thing. And whoever shows up are the pilots and the people that are playing.
Yeah, that totally works because it's like you weren't at you weren't in this battle last week because your character was stuck up in Canada fighting. You weren't able to get down here to Central America and fight this battle because you were stuck up in Canada fighting another battle. But now this other you could pop out players because they're flying around the world in these mechs fighting off different horrors. I feel like this would also be a really interesting mini campaign to craft with the express purpose of basically like 10 candlesing. 10 candlesing, that's not a word, candlesing your players, basically saying like this is gonna die, you're all gonna die, or it's gonna be a 99%. I guess it's theoretically possible one or a few you could make it out of this, but it's gonna be insanely difficult. Like, and as long as everyone has those expectations coming in, right? We're basically saying this is probably gonna culminate in a final stand type battle, an endurance thing that's gonna probably claim all of you.
100%. I would love to run this in a like, even there was this anime Devilman when they relaunched it, and the ending of Devilman just kind of hits in the heart. I would almost want to play with those themes as that type of. It's going to be bleak, and the angels and the horrors are going to do some stuff.
Is there? I haven't the mechanics. If there isn't, if it's not too late, or I'll just homebrew this. Do these have a self-destruct mechanic?
I don't know. We're gonna have to ask them that.
Yeah, it's like because do your final stand. There should be. I love the idea of like you have a cell. You're basically sacrificing your character, and they're going to be like permadead, but you cause an explosion that deals fucking 560 damage or something like that in like a 60-foot radius.
Playing off the Evangelion reference, you totally need to carry the N2 mine and like go charging with your like one arm off and like sacrifice yourself as a pilot, and they have to go pick up your plug pod somewhere else. Yeah, that needs to be a thing. But the other person that I think should back this crowdfunding campaign when they hear this podcast is if you are the kind of patron that wants to support independent TTRPGs getting their first start, to launch the first product in their game line. There is so much noise and chatter about, what's, Wizard of the Coast doing with 6th edition? What are some of the major studios doing with licensed IP? The unique thing about Eldritch Automata is that it is completely unique intellectual property, and it's done from scratch, and that is worth something because the studio, Gehenna Gaming, can play with this. They can write novels. They can expand the media. They can do graphic novels. They can take this in a whole lot of different ways. And if you want to see them with their art style and their writing style succeed and go further, I think that that is worth just the support and the back itself from if you at all follow the OGL controversy or the news and the happenings in the tabletop gaming industry, with press being laid off and artificial intelligence, supporting and collecting original IP is incredibly valuable. So that's another person that I think this game fits for.
Yeah, it's also specifically if you want to support game systems that aren't 5e.
So that said, the question I have for you, Pat, is the last one where we're going to end the podcast is, would you back this project?
I'm pretty sure I'm going to as soon as we're off this. It's just a question of, am I just going to be getting the book or am I going to build a monster?
Gotcha. For me, spoiler, even though I was like critical on some of the aspects of like things that I would possibly change, I'm already a backer. I love their art style so much that they have the tier that become a pilot. I totally dove into it because I want to get a character from one of my novels in artwork form to go do it. And full disclosure, we talked about narratives and campaign modes that, the book may or may not have. One of the stretch goals that is at 125,000 is to bring in narrative writers like Storytellers Forge to actually write a full campaign for Eldritch Automata. And even just listening to Pat and I brainstorm for the past 30 minutes about what we could do with this project, you're all gonna die. And thank you for listening to the S2 Forge.